There's a story in the gospel story, or the gospel narrative, and it talks about Jesus and his disciples, and John's gospel is the only gospel that records the story. And I am not a biblical scholar in the technical sense. And I say in the technical sense because those of us in theological education know that there are those who are especially trained to deal with some technical aspect of the Gospel of John. But I do love the story. And I ask myself the question, why is it that John only got this story? Was he snooping around somewhere, or was he out there with those Samaritans and heard the story? And it might have been that he had some Samaritan friends that he had associated with and picked the story up. Now, I've never read where a scholar said this, but I'm just, using my imagination at this point. And I say to you, don't let theological education dull your imagination. That's one of the exciting things about coming to seminary is for professors to help us to wake up that imagination and imagine and see worldviews that we would have never seen before. That's what Dr. Price did for me this morning at breakfast. He just got the spinning yarns about growing up in L.A. and his background, his educational journey, and I just began to ride on his metaphors and just enjoyed the narrative. But listen to this. It says that Jesus and his disciples were on a journey, and Jesus said to his disciples, I have need. I must go through Samaria. And you said there weren't any interstates back then or, ways of bypassing like we have in great cities now where you take the bypass and go somewhere. But it might have been a little footpath he could have taken, another little dusty road that would have taken him around Samaria. The writer doesn't say that. It just says that he has a burning desire, a need to go through Samaria. And the disciples are disturbed about it because they said, we don't want to go. You don't want to go through Samaria. Do you know anything about Samaria? Surely you don't know those Samaritans. They are some bad jokers. It's like saying to some of us, and not all of us would be of one ethnic group, but it's like saying to some of us who have gotten stuck in a certain class mentality that we need to go through Roxbury. And you say, I don't want to go through that Roxbury. No, it's too risky. It's high risk. Who wants to go through Roxbury? All those ebony children of God over there. No telling what they will do. But Jesus said, no, don't get in my way about this now. It's imperative. I've got to do this. In other words, John is telling the story to say, had Jesus not done this, his ministry would not have been complete. That's almost unthinkable. Because for those who just see that Jesus came to die to save those who were lost, they wouldn't include the story. They would have just talked about his death on Calvary and that he got up the third day morning. But John said, no. He was a social animal. And some of our Christology doesn't include him being a social animal. We so spiritualize these narratives that they have no earthly meaning. And that's what the megachurch has gotten fat off of. I said fat off of spiritualizing these narratives. Whether it's Joel Osteen or whether it's Stanley out of Atlanta, the churches have become rich off of keeping these narratives so spiritual and pure that they don't threaten anybody. And we go home saying praise the Lord. But he says, no, I have got to go through Samaria. And he goes. He does what he says he's got to do. Have you ever had an imperative to ride you into a place that you would not have gone ordinarily? A divine imperative that rides you into a place you would have never gone ordinarily. And if you have not had that experience, then you need to re-enlist in the kingdom of God. Because that's what it does. It invites you it pushes you into a place of uncomfortability. Here I am, standing here. I had an experience one night. I'll share this one with you. I'm a product of the civil rights era. As you can see, I'm not a young cat. I'm a product of the civil rights era. And my roots are Southern, of course. I was born in Washington, D.C., and of parents who migrated from, they weren't married when they migrated to D.C., North Carolina and South Carolina, and grew up in the segregated South, and all of those, experienced all those painful and harsh realities of racism and classism, and went to school with two things in mind. One was I slipped away to go to college. I went to Nashville to go to college because I wanted to get involved in the civil rights movement, and thank God I went right to the place where they were deep into the action. And it was an education that helped me really to want to study ethics. That's really what got me into studying ethics and trying to learn the academic side of it as well. But one night I was coming from having done a Bible study 60 miles away in a little church that I did serving. I was a student at Vanderbilt then, and the car stopped on the highway, and I looked back at a little Volkswagen, and you go to the back of the Volkswagen to raise the hood and jacked it up, and there the fan belt was broken. And I carried an extra fan belt, but I didn't have the tools to put it on. And out there on the interstate, and the cars were just running, and etc. And I said, oh my God, and it was out in the middle of nowhere. And I said, what am I going to do? And there stopped a car, and I could see the shadows, the silhouettes of these characters, long hair, and it was in a vehicle that was making all this noise, and he backed that thing up and down, coming back down the interstate, and stopped right in front of my car. And he gets out, they get out, and these are hillbillies. They are hillbillies. And one had a chaw tobacco in his mouth. That's what they call it, chaw. Yeah. Chaw of tobacco in his mouth, and he spat, and he said, pew. He said, Marty, can I help you? I said, my God, my heart went up in my chest, and I didn't have a gun, didn't have a pocket knife, or nothing. And here they were around me, and I said, my God. And one of my friends in the civil rights movement had been kidnapped and killed by a group of whites who had caught him. He was thumbing it on the highway, and they took him and killed him. And I said, "Oh Jesus, this is it." So I didn't do what a Red Fox number and say, "Lord, I'm coming home," but I said, I said, "Lord, help me, help me, help me." And this is what the guy said to me. He said, "Buddy, don't worry about it." I said, "I don't have a wrench to take it off and put this new belt on." He said, "Oh, that ain't no problem. Hell, we can do that." And this is the chapel, isn't it? Well, hell, we can do that. But what he did was, he said, "You get in the car," and I could hardly understand his, it was so thick. Mountain accent was so thick. He said, "You got in the car, and what you do? And when I say bump, you bump. When I say bump, you bump." And I got in the car, and I would hit it. I would bump the switch, and he stood back there and navigated that belt on. And I said, "Oh my God." He said, "Oh, now crank it up now." Yeah, okay, it's fine. So I said, "What do I owe you?" He said, "Oh, buddy, owe me anything. Just pass the favor. Pass the favor." And I said, "Oh my God, I would have never gone back up into those mountains, because that's up in the mountains of Kentucky and Tennessee. Blacks don't go back up there unless they go with a white person." But the message, and I don't like to pin everything on God, because some of us just pin everything on God. But the divine message for me at that moment was, I wouldn't have gone back up there, but I met him at a moment that was critical, and it broke my stereotype of the mountain hillbilly. And at this age of my life, I don't know whatever happened to those people, but at this age of my life, I still hear him saying, "Just bump. When I say bump, you bump. Say bump, you bump." Jesus had a need to go through Jerusalem. Why? To break the stereotype about the Samaritans. He wanted his disciples to learn a lesson they could not have learned at the Gordon Theological Seminary or at the ITC in Atlanta, that the only way you break the stereotype is to go through forbidden territory. Because he met a woman there at that well. She raised the question with him, "Why would you, a Jew, ask a Samaritan woman? You Jews don't have anything to do with us Samaritans. You must have another card up your sleeve. You must have another card up your sleeve. As a matter of fact, you don't even have a bucket to draw water with, so I'm suspicious of your request." Now, some of you don't have parents old enough, especially you African Americans don't have parents old enough who could help you with this. But I listen to the Me Too ladies, and I love the movement, and I support the movement. But we come from an ethnic group where the whole group was Me Too, and nobody heard us. Nobody heard us. Our women didn't even have a chance. And yet, they had the audacity to love the Jesus story that was given to them by the people who raped them. Let me repeat that, because my book is on the Jesus crises in black consciousness. And I have struggled ever since I was a little boy with the question of how is it that my people could love Jesus almost fanatically. And this Jesus was given to them, or the story about Jesus. The story, anyway, not the Christology, but the story was given to them by a people who enslaved them and raped them at will, and still went to church and still sang, "Nearer, my God, to thee." That is the question, you see, that the black Muslims asked us. Yeah, they asked us that question. Farrakhan I've heard him stand for 2 hours and just go and bam, 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 right in our chapel. And forcing us to struggle with, who is this Jesus? Who is this Jesus? Who is it for Gordon-Conwell? Who is it for you students who come here to study? And who will go back to churches and say to you that if you got a prophetic, if your Jesus has any prophetic DNA, will say to you that you got the wrong one. Well, you don't have a bucket to draw water with. What are you up to? Most of you would have preached this sermon and you would say, well, Riggins, Earl, how do you find that in the text? Because she is of the lower class. She's not ethnically qualified to question a rabbi from Nazareth. And she knows she's not ethnically qualified, but she dares to do it anyway. You Jews have no dealings with us Samaritans. Isn't it ironic that we built a culture in terms of sexual exploitation on that it's not a sin to exploit the helpless? That's why we got Hollywood and all this Me Too coming back at us, because this is nothing new. It has gone on for years, generations, of where the weaker was taken advantage of, and it was not a sin in the eyes of the ones who did it. And he throws a trump card on her. That's just, to me, fascinating, and I've got to sit down. But I wish we had time to have a conversation about this, because listen to the trump card he throws on her. Woman, he didn't know her name. At least the text portrays him as not knowing her name. And this is what he says. If you had but known. It's what we don't know that makes us prisoners of a thirsty land. Isn't it? It's what we don't know. That the source of what we need is right in our midst. But we don't know it. I didn't know that night that these were good Samaritans. I had no idea that they were good Samaritans. I saw them as being Tennessee hillbillies. No, the tag was Kentucky. Kentucky hillbillies. And yet, the mayor of Nashville would have passed me by. The governor of the state would have passed me by. But they stopped. I used to tell my children that story. I said, you can't, son or daughter, you can't, don't stereotype. Don't get into that racism thing, because your deliverer might come in your stereotype. I got to sit down. Lord have mercy. I wish, in the black church, if I had time to preach this, we'd just be getting warmed up. But your deliverer might come in your stereotype. Whether it's the homosexual, whether it's the lesbian, your deliverer. Woman, had you not known. And she melted and gave way to her stereotype and said, give me the water. Oh, my God. My God. Then she said something else theological that's so fascinating to me. You Jews, y'all got separate places of worship. We worship our God in Jacob's mountain. You all go. You said Jerusalem is the place. But he's a great hermeneut, isn't he? Is your Christ a great hermeneut? The one who deconstructs stereotypes? Huh? The one who breaks down those barriers and liberates us from them. He said, yeah, I know what you all have been doing. I know you've been doing it for years. But he said, I tell you, the day is coming. It won't be Jerusalem, and it won't be this mountain. The day is coming. Isn't that good news? It's a promissory note about salvation, that the day is coming when we will be delivered from our localized minds. When our localized minds will be set free and to understand that God is a spirit, and they that worship him must worship him in spirit